Welcome to the world of Sci-Fi Stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. They thought a single human warship was no threat. They were wrong. The Varian war fleet drifted through the cold void of space, a vast armada of destruction, over 20,000 warships, each bristling with weapons and shields. Strong enough to crush entire civilizations, hovered in perfect formation. Their massive dreadnought, the unyielding Wrath, sat at the heart of the fleet, a fortress of metal, its cannons capable of reducing planets to dust. Al-Kavar stood tall on the bridge, his blue-gray exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. His species, the Varians, had conquered over 30 star systems, wiping out lesser civilizations that dared resist. He had spent decades spreading their empire, crushing primitive and advanced races alike, and he had no intention of stopping. Now they faced their newest conquest, the Sol system, humanity. A minor species barely scratching at the edges of interstellar travel. They had no empire, no colonies worth mentioning. Their technology was outdated, their ships slow and fragile. There was no need for diplomacy, no need for negotiation. Humanity would surrender, or they would burn. Kavar turned to his second in command, Captain Threx. Report. Threx bowed his head. Their defenses are laughable, Admiral L. Scattered orbital platforms, a handful of outdated warships, and one anomaly. Kavar narrowed his reptilian eyes. An anomaly. Threx hesitated. A single human warship, sir, large, but alone. It came from outside the system and is currently on an intercept course. They sent no transmissions, no demands, just a single ship coming straight at us. Kavar let out a hissing chuckle. They must be suicidal. What is its classification? Threx tapped his console. The holographic display shifted to show the human warship. It was an ugly, blocky thing, painted jet black with no identifying markers, unlike Varian vessels, which were sleek and insectoid. This ship looked brutal, functional, designed for war rather than beauty. Its heat signature was unusual, running far hotter than expected. No official records. Admiral Threx admitted it doesn't match anything in their fleet registry. The closest comparison is their outdated Dren class. But this one is different. Our sensors can't penetrate its hull. Kavar scoffed. It's one ship. What could they possibly hope to accomplish? The bridge crew laughed. A single human vessel against the might of the Varian war machine. It was laughable, yet, as they watched, the lone human warship continued its silent approach. No transmissions, no response to hails, just relentless, unwavering movement toward the fleet. Kavar waved a hand dismissively. Destroy it. Threx relayed the command. 3 Varian cruisers broke formation, their plasma lances charging with destructive energy. The lead ship, the Vengeance Blade, fired first lance of superheated plasma, streaked through the void, slamming into the human warship. Nothing happened. The plasma seemed to splash against some kind of invisible barrier, dispersing harmlessly. A ripple of unease spread through the bridge. Their shields absorbed it. Threx muttered. Kavar frowned. Fire again. All 3 ships, the cruisers, obeyed. Plasma and missile fire erupted from their hulls, streaking toward the lone vessel. Explosions blossomed against its surface, filling the void with fire and light. But when the smoke cleared, the human warship remained unscathed, not a scratch. Kavar's amusement turned to irritation. What is the meaning of this? Thex's hands trembled over his console. Admiral, this is impossible. No known shielding can withstand that level of firepower. Their ship isn't just deflecting the energy, it's consuming it. The realization hit them all at once. The human ship wasn't just enduring their attacks, it was feeding off them. Then, for the first time, the warship responded. Its engines flared with an unnatural, blinding glow. It moved not in the slow, calculated way of conventional starships, but with an unnatural, predatory speed. In a blink, it closed the distance between itself and the Vengeance Blade. And then it fired. A single thin beam of crimson light lanced out from the human ship's hull, striking the Varian cruiser dead center. The Vengeance Blade didn't explode, it didn't break apart, it vanished. One moment the ship was there, the next a gaping hole of nothing remained, a void of absolute darkness, as if the ship had been erased from existence. The bridge of the unyielding Wrath fell into stunned silence. Calves Blood ran cold. What kind of weapon was that? Thex's voice was barely a whisper. Sir, it didn't destroy that ship, it erased it. From reality, panic rippled through the Varian fleet. The remaining two cruisers desperately tried to flee, their engines burning white-hot. The human warship didn't let them. It moved like a predator among prey, its dark hull barely visible. Against the void it fired twice more, and both cruisers suffered the same fate. Erased in an instant, wiped from existence, as if they had never been. Kavar clenched his mandibles. This was no ordinary human vessel, this was something else. And then, for the first time, the warship spoke. A transmission crackled to life. Across all Varian channels, the voice was deep, synthetic. Emotionless, you have trespassed into human space, you have attacked unprovoked. This is your only warning. The fleet was paralyzed. No one had ever heard a human speak with such unwavering authority. No fear, no hesitation, just cold certainty. Kavar slammed his fist against his chair. All ships fire everything. Destroy that abomination. The fleet obeyed. Hundreds of plasma lances, torpedoes, and kinetic rounds tore through the void. It was enough firepower to crack a planet in half, and yet the human ship stood unharmed. Then it moved again, straight toward the unyielding wrath. A single human warship against the might of an entire armada. They had thought it was no threat. They were wrong. Cav's mandibles twitched as sheer disbelief spread through his body. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. The Varian fleet had conquered dozens of civilizations, reducing proud empires to rubble in mere days. No species had ever stood against them, let alone a single warship. Yet here it was this human vessel, this thing wiping his ships from existence, like they were nothing. The alarms on the unyielding wrath blared. Admiral, the enemy ship is closing in. Thex's voice was shrill, his usual discipline cracking. Redirect all power to shields. Kavar roared, we are the unyielding wrath. We do not fall. The bridge crew scrambled, feeding every ounce of available energy into the dreadnought's formidable defenses. The ship's shields crackled with raw power, layers upon layers of energy interwoven into an impenetrable wall. No weapon had ever breached them. Outside, the black human warship remained eerily silent. No additional transmissions, no signs of communication. Just that slow, deliberate movement, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Then, without warning, it accelerated. The human ship vanished from its previous position, closing the distance. In an instant it reappeared, directly in front of the dread, and so close that the bridge crew could see its surface in chilling detail. There were no markings, no windows, no external weapons visible, and yet it looked alive. The hull shifted subtly, its matte black exterior absorbing the surrounding light. Something about it was wrong, unnatural. Cav's blood turned to ice fire. Everything, the dreadnought's weapons roared to life, unleashing a storm of destruction. Plasma cannons, hyper accelerated rail guns, missile swarms, all of it rained down upon the lone warship. In a continuous, merciless barrage, the space around the human ship became an inferno of energy, the sheer force of the assault enough to war local gravity for several long seconds. It was engulfed in chaos, lost beneath the overwhelming firepower of the Varian flagship. Kavar exhaled sharply, gripping the armrest of his command throne. Then the smoke cleared. The human warship remained untouched. A cold silence settled over the bridge. Threx took a step back. Impossible, the crew murmured in hushed, terror-ified tones. The Varians did not fear battle, they relished it. Yet now, for the first time in his career, Kavar saw something on his bridge he had never seen before. True, unfiltered panic. Then, without warning, the ship spoke again. Your shields will not protect you. The moment the words finished, something horrifying happened. The dreadnought's shield, its greatest defense, its impenetrable wall of energy, collapsed in an instant. Not overloaded, not breached, simply gone. The ship's energy systems flickered violently. Consoles sparked. Crew members stumbled back from their stations. Cav's eyes widened in shock. What did they do? Threx frantically scanned his console. I don't know. It wasn't an EMP, it wasn't a weapon. It was like the shield just ceased to exist. The lights dimmed for the first time since the battle began. The hum ship revealed its weapon. A soft hum resonated through space. A single point of crimson light flared to life on the front of the ship. The same weapon that had erased 3 of his cruisers. Kavar gripped the arms of his throne. His mind raced for a solution, a strategy anything, but deep down he knew there was no defense, no escape, no chance. He had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated humanity. The bridge of the unyielding wrath was deathly silent. No one moved, no one spoke. The crimson light at the front of the human warship burned brighter, pulsing like the heartbeat of a god. Staring down at an insect, Admiral Barr's mind was a storm of calculations and survival instincts. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to act, to do something. But what could he do? His dread, the most powerful warship in the Varian fleet, was defenseless. His shields had vanished like mist in the wind. His weapons had done nothing, and the human ship, it had barely even tried. Kavar turned to Threx, who stood frozen in place, his eyes locked on the enemy vessel like a prey animal paralyzed before its predator. Prepare the fleet for full retreat, Kavar ordered, his voice a low, controlled growl. We will not die here. Threx blinked, snapping out of his daze. Admiral, retreat. We do it, Kavar roared. Now Threx flinched, then rushed to send the command across the fleet. The surviving Varian warships scrambled into motion, their engines roared to life. Emergency warp drives charging at full capacity. It was chaos. Captain frantically rerouting power, crew members panicking as they realized the unthinkable. They were losing. The Ryans had never retreated from battle before. They had never needed to, but now the only choice was flight or annihilation. But the human ship wasn't going to let them go so easily. You were warned, the voice from the ship declared. The crimson light pulsed once, and then it fired. The beam cut through space like a divine judgment. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something more, something terrifying. It struck the nearest Varian battleship, the Iron Fang. And just like before, the ship didn't explode, it didn't break apart. It simply ceased to be. One moment it was there, then next gone. The void where it had been was eerily silent, a patch of nothingness, where reality itself seemed to reject the ship's existence. The fleet's calm channels erupted in terrified voices. Captains screamed, officers shouted contradictory orders. Some ships fired in desperation, others broke formation and ran without command. It didn't matter. The human ship moved again. Cav's claws dug into the armrest of his throne as he watched the impossible unfold. The warship danced through the battlefield like a phantom, appearing and disappearing in flashes of unnatural speed. With each pulse of its crimson light, another Varian ship vanished, one after another. Gone. It wasn't war anymore. It was a massacre. Cav's own vessel trembled as the surrounding space was stripped of his fleet. The sheer efficiency of the slaughter made his exoskeleton and crawl. And then suddenly the human ship stopped. The black void of its hull faced the unyielding wrath directly. Kavar could feel it watching him. The voice returned, calm and absolute. Admiral Kavar of the Varian Empire. His blood froze. Your empire has declared war against humanity. You have attacked unprovoked. Your actions have consequences. Kavar swallowed. His throat was dry, his hands trembling. We surrender. The bridge crew turned to him in shock. Ryans did not surrender. They fought to the last breath. They burned their enemies, and if they were to fall, they took their foes with them. That was their way, that was their honor. But honor meant nothing in the face of absolute annihilation. Kavar stepped forward, gripping the control panel with shaking hands. He took a deep breath, suppressing the shame that burned inside him. We were wrong, he said, forcing the words out. We underestimated you. Please let us leave. Silence for a moment. Kavar hoped that the human ship would accept their surrender. Then the voice came one final time. There is no surrender. The crimson light flared. Kavar closed his eyes. Kavar braced himself for oblivion. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be helpless. The crimson light flared, the hum of the weapon vibrating through his bones. His entire existence, his empire, his conquests, his legacy was about to be erased in a flash of human wrath. But then nothing. The energy surged from the human warship, faded. The crimson glow dimmed. The bridge of the unyielding wrath was silent except for the ragged breathing of terrified officers. Cav's eyes snapped open. He was alive. What happened? He whispered. Threx's face, still twisted in fear, hesitated before answering. The human ship had stopped on the view screen. The void black warship remained motionless. It was watching them. The same synthetic voice returned now, impossibly calm. Cal, we do Not kill for sport. The word sent a cold shiver through Kark's spine. That single sentence carried an implication more terrifying than any weapon. It meant that this massacre hadn't even been personal. The humans had wiped out half the fleet as easily as a god, crushing insects underfoot, not out of anger, not out of vengeance, simply because they could. Kevar's throat was dry, his mandibles trembled as he spoke. Then what do you want? Another pause. Then the voice answered, you came to conquer, now you will carry our message instead. Kavar stiffened. Message return to your empire. Tell them what happened here. Tell them humanity is not to be provoked. Tell them what happens when they send fleets into our territory. Kavar clenched his fists. He had never been humiliated like this, never been allowed to live after defeat. It was almost worse than death. The bridge crew stared at him, waiting for his response. He could order one final suicidal attack. He could try to restore his honor, go down fighting. But what would that change? He had seen what the human warship could do. If he attacked, he would die, and no one would know what happened. Here, if he lived, the Varian Empire would know the truth. That was the real punishment. Not death, but fear. Kavar swallowed his pride. We will leave now. The human ship didn't respond, but the path before them opened for the first time. Their navigation systems unlocked. The strange energy that had prevented their warp drives from engaging was gone. Kavar turned to Threx. Order all surviving ships to retreat. We're returning home. Threx nodded hurriedly, sending the command within minutes. The remaining Varian ships, barely a fraction of the fleet they had arrived with, engaged. Their warp drives blinking out of the system, one by one. Kavar was the last to leave. As the countdown for the jump began, he cast one final look at the human warship. It hadn't moved, hadn't pursued it, simply lingered like a silent guardian watching its prey scurry away. In terror, Kavar gritted his teeth. This is not over. The moment they returned to Varian space, he would report this to the High Council. They would gather intelligence. They would learn what humanity truly was. And next time, they would be ready, or so he thought, as the warp drive engaged, and the dread shot into hyperspace. A final transmission whispered through the ship's systems. Not a threat, not a warning, just two words: you won't. The warp tunnel twisted and shimmered around the unyielding wrath as it raced through hyperspace, retreating from the nightmare it had just faced. The dreadnought's once mighty fleet had been shattered, reduced to a handful of survivors fleeing in disgrace. Admiral Kavar sat in his command throne, his claws tapping against the armrest. In a slow, methodical rhythm, his mind was a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. He had been victorious in every campaign, had crushed countless enemies beneath the might of the Varian Empire, but now he was running from a single human warship. The shame was unbearable. Admiral Threx said hesitantly, his voice quiet. The crew, they are uneasy. Kavar let out a slow breath. Uneasy was an understatement. The moment they had entered warp, the entire ship had fallen into a stunned, horrified silence. Friends were warriors. They did not fear battle, did not flinch in the face of death. And yet the bridge officers, the soldiers, even the lowest technicians, had all seen the same thing. A lone human vessel had stripped them of their power, their control, their existence, like an apex predator deciding whether or not to finish its meal. Kavar turned to his second in command. How many of our ships made it? Threx hesitated before answering. Of the 217 warships that entered the SA system, 23 remain. A muscle in Kav's jaw twitched. 23, less than a tenth of their forces had survived, and the humans, they had lost nothing. He clenched his fist, exhaling sharply. The High Council will demand answers. Threx nodded. Yes, Admiral, but they will not believe us. Kavar knew he was right. The Varian Empire had ruled through strength, through sheer overwhelming force. The idea that a single human warship had erased their fleet effortlessly without suffering a scratch was inconceivable. The Council will think we are lying. Kavar muttered. Threx swallowed hard. Or worse, that we are cowards. Kavar's mandibles clicked together in frustration. If the Council saw them as weak, they would be stripped of their ranks, cast into disgrace, or even executed for failing the Empire number. He would not allow that to happen. We must return with more than just words. Kavar decided we need proof. Thex's head tilted slightly. Proof, Sir. Kavar leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with determination. Our ship recorded everything: the battle, the destruction of our fleet, the human weaponry. If we present undeniable evidence to the Council, they will have no choice but to listen. Threx hesitated. You wish to warn them, Kark. Voice was low, filled with barely contained rage. I wish to destroy them. The bridge crew tensed at his words. Even after witnessing humanity's power, the fire of vengeance still burned in their admiral's chest. We will study their technology. We will adapt, Kivar continued. We will find a way to counter their weapons. Humanity has proven itself to be the greatest threat we have ever faced, which means they must be eliminated before they can strike again. Threx nodded, though his unease remained. And if the High Council refuses? Kavar's expression darkened. Then we will make them understand. A chime echoed through the bridge. Admiral, we are exiting hyperspace, a crew member announced. Kivar straightened in his throne, preparing himself for the storm that was about to come. The viewport shimmered as the swirling lights of hyperspace collapsed into normal space before them. The crimson jewel of the Varian Empire hung in the void. Varia Prime, their home world. Massive orbital stations hovered in place, protecting the capital world, with layer upon layer of warships. Towering spires of metal and fire stretched across the planet's surface, a civilization built upon centuries of conquest. And yet, as the unyielding wrath approached, Kivar felt something was wrong. Why are they not hailing us? Threx muttered. The fleet should have been met with immediate transmissions, questions, demands. Yet there was only silence. Scan the system, Kivar ordered, his gut twisting. A moment later, a horrified gasp echoed from one of the bridge officers. Sir, we are detecting anomalies across the planet. Kivar's blood ran cold. What kind of anomalies? The officer's mandibles trembled. Gravitational distortions, radiation signatures we do not recognize, and missing sections of the planet's surface. Kivar's heart pounded in his chest. Missing? The officer's voice dropped to a whisper, as if they were erased. Kivar shot to his feet, his eyes wide in disbelief. He turned back to the viewport, and then he saw it, the black warship. It hung above Varia Prime, like a phantom, waiting for them. Cab's breath caught in his throat. No, that's impossible. Threx was shaking. How did then? For the first time, an incoming transmission crackled through the bridge. You thought we would let you run the human warship's voice was calm, controlled, inevitable. You were wrong. The crimson glow flared to life. Once more, Kivar screamed. Kivar's mind reeled. The human warship had beaten them back, had shattered their fleet, had given them a single chance to retreat, and yet here it was waiting at their home world. He gripped the edges of his command throne, his claws digging into the metal. His breath came fast and shallow. How, he whispered, how did they get here before us? Threx looked equally horrified. They followed us. No, not followed, anticipated us. Kivar's mandibles clicked together. Impossible. No ship could track a fleet through hyperspace. No ship could arrive before one. Warp travel was instantaneous over vast distances, yes, but it was still predictable. The mathematics of arrival were absolute unless Admiral, one of the bridge officers, stammered. Our systems are picking up localized time distortions. The words sent ice through Cab's veins. Localized time distortions. They hadn't just been followed. The human warship had bent time itself to reach Varia Prime. First, a slow, awful realization settled over Kivar. They were not dealing with technology as they understood it. This wasn't just superior firepower. This wasn't just a more advanced enemy. This was something beyond them. Sir, Threx whispered, eyes glued to the viewport. The home world. Kivar turned to look, and his heart stopped. Varia Prime was wounded. Sections of the planet's surface were simply gone. Whole cities, entire landscapes erased, as if they had never existed. Not burned, not bombarded, just missing. It was as if reality itself had been rewritten. No, Kivar muttered, his claws trembled against his throne. This isn't possible. This isn't war. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Even the war-hardened officers, Varians who had conquered entire species, who had never feared anything, were silent, because this was no longer a battle. This was judgment. Then the human voice returned, its tone cold and unfeeling. You were warned. Kivar snapped his gaze to the black warship, his desperation rising. We retreated, he snarled. We obeyed your demand. Why have you come here? The reply was immediate. because your empire will seek revenge, because your leaders will not accept defeat, because left alone your kind will return. Kavar's breath hitched. We this war is over. Your species does not get a second chance. The crimson glow flared once more, and then it fired the beam of red light straight through the void, slamming into the planetary defense grid with effortless precision. Shields, which had been impenetrable for centuries, collapsed in an instant, vanishing as though they had never existed. The planetary defense cannons, built to shatter enemy fleets, fired in desperation, but the moment their energy bolts reached the human ship, they simply ceased. The attacks were erased from existence before they could even land. The black warship didn't move. It didn't need to. Cav's claws trembled against the armrest of his throne. We need to do something, but there was nothing left to do. He had seen this before. His fleet had fired everything they had of the human ship, their most powerful weapons, their strongest defenses. None of it had mattered, and now the unyielding wrath was just another speck of dust before a storm. The bridge was a cacophony of panicked voices, officers screaming for orders, crew members scrambling at their consoles, the dreadnought's weapons primed, targeting the human ship. Fuddle. The crimson light pulsed again, and the unyielding wrath ceased to exist. Kavar did not feel death. There was no explosion, no pain. One moment he was in his command throne, surrounded by his officers. The next he was alone. A void stretched around him, endless and black. No sound, no stars, just nothing. He looked down. He had no body. He was, and yet he wasn't. What? His voice cracked, the words feeling distant. Then the voice returned, the human voice, but now it was different. No longer synthetic, no longer cold. Now it was something far more terrifying. It was human, real, calm. Understanding this is the consequence of your actions. Kavar tried to move. He could not. Where? What is this? This is what remains. Panic clawed at his mind. What did you do? The voice was quiet. We erased what was hostile. His mind whirled. He tried to picture Viria Prime, his empire, his fleet, but the images were fading like they had